Hello chaps, welcome once again to John Robson Guitar Tuition. As always, I do hope you're well. Now, in this age in which we live, of instant on-demand video streaming of pretty much anything on any topic under the sun, it's quite easy to forget that back in the olden days of like the 70s and the 80s, and even the 90s, I guess, there were precious few opportunities to sit in the comfort of your own living room and see, your favourite rock band or rock stars playing live or being interviewed. I mean, yes, you could read interviews in the music press, but that wasn't quite the same, was it? It didn't give you that sort of sense of being in the room with this person and, reading the body language and so on. And it just wasn't quite the same thing. It was once removed. So, whenever there was an opportunity to see something like that, it was a rare treat. And the sense of excitement in some cases was palpable, knowing that on Friday evening there was going to be this show on TV which featured this band that you were really interested in. And not only were they going to be playing live, they were going to be talking about their new album as well. And it was a real treat to look forward to. In some cases it was a bit like Christmas. It's no exaggeration to say that. So, whilst I'm not advocating that everything was better in the olden days in some kind of misty-eyed, rose-tinted, nostalgic version of the past that never probably really was anyway, it is quite easy to indulge in a little bit of nostalgia for that sense of excitement and wonder of seeing your favourite rock band or artist on screen and feeling like they're in the same room as you. And that's what this video is all about. I'm basically going to be talking about 5 of the best, I think, music-themed TV shows from the 70s and 80s. These were all on it in the UK, and I'm not sure how many of them were exported, so apologies if some of these shows never made it to your native land, but if they didn't, well, why not leave a comment in the comment section below about some sort of equivalent TV show that was on where you grew up, and I'll be sure to check it out. So, that said, let's crack on with show number 1 on the list. Number 1. Now, in the UK, before 1982, we had 3 TV channels. We had BBC One, BBC Two, both state-run, and ITV, the single commercial channel in the UK up to that point. Then we got a 4th TV channel, another commercial channel called Channel 4. And it kind of brought a slew of new shows, a cosy little afternoon words and numbers game show called Countdown, which continues to this day. And a new soap opera set on Merseyside called Brookside, which has long since bitten the dust. And we also got a new music show called Gas Tank, which is bizarre in the fact that no one remembers it. No one of an age like me that should be able to remember it can remember it for some reason. But it did exist. It was hosted, as you can see, by Rick Wakeman and his pal Tony Ashton, who you might remember from a band called Ashton, Gardner and Dyke, who had a bit of a hit with something called Resurrection Shuffle. And he was also a keyboard session player and various other things. But he co-hosted this show with Rick Wakeman. There was a house band there, and it was set in kind of a bar-type environment with a small audience. And each week, various musical guests would turn up and be interviewed and play live and jam and have some fun. The clip that I've linked down below shows Phil Lynott and John Sykes, who'd very, very recently before that joined Thin Lizzy. But other guests included Ian Pace, John Entwistle, Steve Hackett, and many, many other members of the rock glitterati of the day. In some ways, it was kind of a precursor to shows like Later with Jules Holland. And for whatever reason, it got cancelled after the first series. It was essential viewing for anyone who was into music back then, and I think Channel 4 cancelled it on the grounds that it wasn't getting the ratings. But that always seemed a little bit bizarre to me, that, well, Channel 4's job was to be a bit niche and a bit edgy and go after the less obvious kind of audiences. So, you know, the fact that it wasn't getting the ratings always seemed a bit of a spurious argument to me. But anyway, it was cancelled. There's plenty of clips of it on YouTube, so check them out. They do look a bit dated now, but, you know, it was the early 80s. What do you expect? Anyway, let's move on to number 2.
Number 2.
Okay, now we move on to Rock Goes to College, which ran from 1978 to 81 on the BBC. It kind of says it all in the title, really. It was fairly big name rock bands of the time playing on university and college campuses. I think the BBC acted as a promoter in this respect. I think they fronted the money so that the struggling, cash-starved university bursars could afford to put on the bands like this for the students. It was just a great series of live gigs on the TV. Bands that appeared on this were the Boomtown Rats, Bob Geldof, obviously, the Rich Kids. Anybody else remember the Rich Kids? It was Glenn Matlock of Sex Pistols fame and Midge Ure doing a sort of a short-lived pop-punk type thing. The Climax Blues Band, they did a set on this show. Anybody else remember them? You know, what was that big song they had? Couldn't get it right. Cheap Trick. George Thorogood did a show for them. Doesn't say here whether he had the Destroyers with him, but I imagine he did. And then there's the clip that I've linked down below, AC/DC. I vividly remember the original broadcast of this. And up until that point, I had no idea that music could be this sweaty and chaotic and exciting and just fabulous. You can see the audience are really having a great time, as well as the band on stage. So check it out. It really is difficult to imagine this much fun happening on a modern university campus, isn't it, really? Anyway, let's move on.
Number 3.
Now, my dad was a farmer, and the only real time he used to watch TV was on a Sunday lunchtime, early afternoon, when there would be a whole load of farming related shows on TV. The ad breaks would always be full of products that would increase the milk yield in your Friesian herd or something like that. And the shows themselves often contained endless, dull discussions about the merits of one method of crop rotation versus another. Dull as ditch water, but my dad used to like it. Nevertheless, I used to love Sunday early afternoon TV because it featured a show called Rock School, which was basically, it was on the BBC. It ran from, I think, let me check, 83 to 87. And it was basically a band in a TV studio, 3-piece band. There was Deirdre Cartwright on guitar, Henry Thomas on bass, and Jeff Nichols on drums. And if I'd thought of this ahead of time, I would have Googled them to see what each of those are up to now, but you can do that. It was basically a different genre each week. One week it would be rock, another week it would be reggae, another week it would be blues, another week it would be funk, etc., etc. And this band would teach you the fundamentals of how to play this particular genre. They would discuss the techniques needed, and they would discuss equipment that you might need, effects pedals and so on. And there would also be interview segments with famous rock stars of the day. The clip that I've linked down below shows, well, part of it shows Gary Moore, a very young and fresh-faced Gary Moore, discussing his effects pedals. There's loads of clips of this show scattered around YouTube, so if you want a little bit of a time capsule of early 80s rock music and music tuition, then check them out. They do look a bit dated, obviously, but there's still a lot of valuable content went in there, and, you know, incidentally, this show is the thing that taught me that useful little pattern of notes that I could play lots and lots of riffs with was actually called a pentatonic scale. And that set me on a path which I'm still on to this day. Anyway, let's move on to the next one.
Number 4.
If you were an adolescent music fan in the early 80s in the UK, then there was only one show that you were absolutely riveted to. It was on a Friday evening on Channel 4, and it was called The Tube. It was the antidote to the safe, sanitised and perhaps a little bit patronising format of a show like Top of the Pops, which was the BBC's main youth culture music programming. It was made in this part of the world, actually, the northeast of England, and it was hosted by Jules Holland and Paula Yates. And it featured a whole who's who of who was big in the music industry at that particular period. Everyone from Thin Lizzy through to Grandmaster Flash, the Communards, Flock of Seagulls, Dexy's Midnight Runners, as I say, anyone and everyone. It was a live music and interview kind of magazine type show with a studio audience. It was very fast paced and a little bit edgy and quite controversial at times because, well, especially because of one trailer that they put out for the show during Kids TV, which had a naughty word in it. Let's say no more than that. The main reason why I'm kind of nostalgic about this show is because it brings back memories of my school days, especially one particular performance on the show. The biggest band in the UK in the early 80s was, without a shadow of a doubt, The Jam, fronted, of course, by Paul Weller. And at the height of their fame, they broke up. Well, Paul Weller disbanded them is probably more accurate to say. And their final TV appearance of any kind was playing a live set on the Tube, and the sense of excitement in our school when everybody who was into this band, even I was, and I didn't really like their music, but I had to kind of grudgingly admit that it was pretty good anyway. The sense of excitement throughout the school was just electric. You know, we were ticking off the days till Friday when we were going to see a Jam gig on the TV, and it was really rather good. To remind you how good it is if you were there, or to show you how good it was if you don't remember it, there's a link to that particular performance in the description box below. Right, let's move on to the final item on the list.
Number 5.
And finally, we come to the one show that you've probably been wondering why I haven't mentioned it already. Before I tell you what it is, in case you haven't already guessed, I will just point out that most of my memories of this show are in black and white, because for one Christmas when I was a kid, I got one of these things, a Plustron TV radio cassette player. Fabulous piece of kit. Imagine the thrill of an adolescent getting the latest iPhone these days and multiply that by about 1 million. You know, suddenly I wasn't reliant upon my parents letting me watch what I would like to watch on the TV. I could just skitter off to my bedroom and watch what I wanted to watch on TV, no questions asked. And many a night I would lay there in bed with the little single mono earpiece plugged in, watching things like Hammer House of Horror and anything else that my parents probably didn't want me watching. And one such show was this one, the Old Grey Whistle Test. Of course, that's the show that I'm talking about. First of all, it was hosted by Whispering Bob Harris, a British institution if ever there was one. And it was a very, very late night slot. And the idea was that it was focusing on serious rock music, and once again it was live performances and interviews and just generally a chance to see your rock idols up close and personal, hear them play live, albeit in mono, and see them, albeit in black and white in my case. And of course, you know, if you had a cassette deck on your TV set, as I did in this case with the old Plustron, you could actually record it as well. So there you go, and relive the magic of it every time. Bands that appeared on this show included Camel. I saw them for the first time on this show. ZZ Top, Meatloaf. John Lennon did a set on the Old Grey Whistle Test round about the time that he did that album full of rock and roll covers where he had the hit with Stand By Me. Bob Marley and the Wailers were on there at least once, I think, and Patti Smith. That clip of her on there, the Patti Smith group, is still replayed on the BBC to this day. It was a fantastic show, and because it was a late night slot, it was the final programme in the schedule on BBC Two. The producers, or the bigwigs at the BBC, thought that they could bury it in that slot because it wasn't really a show that they were that enthusiastic about, I imagine. But what it meant was, because there was no show that it would crash into after it, it could just overrun and overrun and overrun. I think it was nominally a 30-minute show, but it was often an hour or more long, and it was just pure magic. As I say, it was a great opportunity to see the rock and roll and rock music idols of the day, and kind of get to hear them speak and watch them play live, which we were sort of starved of in those days. Incidentally, yes, the Old Grey Whistle Test. I only found this out recently, why it was called the Old Grey Whistle Test. Apparently, it stems from the fact that the Brill Building in New York, a very famous song factory, where the likes of Carole King and Neil Sedaka first honed their songwriting skills. The test for whether a song was good enough or not is they would play the song to one of the grey-suited doormen, who were known as the Old Greys, and if the Old Greys could whistle the song after a couple of listens, it had passed the Old Grey Whistle Test. So that's why it was called the Old Grey Whistle Test. The theme music from the show, what was it called? Stone Fox Chase, by, I can't remember who, Area Code 615, became a big hit in the UK at one point. And the other interesting thing about this is it was broadcast from a tiny little studio known as Presentation B inside BBC TV Centre. And when I say tiny, I mean 32 feet by 22 feet. And it was a dingy little hole of a place by the looks of it, kind of exposed wiring on the walls and stuff. And, it's just all of these big bands, The Who were on there at one point, would come and play in this cramped little studio, and it just made it all the more intimate and special because of it. There's one thing seeing a band like The Who on a big stage, but when they're there, effectively, it's kind of the experience almost of seeing them, in a small venue and being there yourself. So there you go, the Old Grey Whistle Test heads up the 5 classic music TV shows from the 70s and 80s, basically showing what guitarists and music enthusiasts in the UK used to watch before YouTube came along. I do hope you've enjoyed this little rundown, this trip down memory lane, this unashamed nostalgia fest, and if you have, please hit the subscribe button if you haven't already done so, and give me a like while you're at it. And I will just mention as well, of course, that there is a charity auction going on for this guitar. This is the Gretsch G2420T Gold Streamliner, which I reviewed a couple of videos ago. All proceeds from the sale of this guitar will go to Zoe's Place Baby Hospice, which is a charity in Middlesbrough which provides palliative, respite and end-of-life care to children under 5 with terminal illnesses. A fantastically worthy cause. So the listing is linked in the description box below, so get your bidding trousers on and go and help us raise some money for that very worthy cause. And I will also, of course, just mention at the moment that I have something on sale at the moment for myself. I have a course called Making the Modes Easy, which you can download from there, the lessons page on my website. It contains everything you need to know about modes in a plain English, jargon-free way. There's all of the scale patterns you need. There's example solos shown up close in video. You get jam tracks, you get tabs, everything to become an absolute master of the whole topic of modes, and it's only 40 quid, so why not go and treat yourself? Or if you would prefer some tailored one-to-one guitar tuition, then get in touch with me via the details at the end of this video. If you live on Teesside in the northeast of England, you can come along for a face-to-face lesson, or wherever else you are in the world, you can have a lesson via Skype, and whichever way you do it, your first lesson is of course free. So what have you got to lose? And with that, I'll bid you a very good day and say thank you so much for watching, thank you for your time, and I will look forward to seeing you all again next time around. Bye for now, folks.